Human stayed with an alien girl through the long freeze. Her morning confession warmed him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to the main characters. Jake Mitchell had been a soldier all his life, serving in countless cold, inhospitable places across the galaxy. But nothing could have prepared him for the frozen expanse he now found himself in, stranded on a desolate planet light years away from home. The wind howled like a beast outside their shelter, and the temperature had dropped so low that even the most advanced survival suits struggled to maintain warmth. Inside their small refuge, the fire crackled weakly, its light barely enough to cut through the biting cold. Jake sat close to the fire, his eyes glancing over at the alien girl who had become his unexpected companion through this brutal winter. Her name was Zara, a creature of beauty and mystery, with skin the color of deep emerald and eyes that seemed to glow with an intensity that matched the fire's warmth. She had been injured during their crash landing, her legs severely wounded, and in this hostile environment, survival had become a matter of sheer willpower. Jake had made the decision to stay with her, tending to her injuries and ensuring she didn't succumb to the freezing temperatures outside. In the days that followed, they had formed an unlikely bond, two beings from different worlds, relying on each other to stay alive. Zara, despite her strength, had initially resisted Jake's care, pushing him away with every gesture of kindness. She was proud, fiercely independent, and felt she had nothing to offer him in return. But Jake didn't mind. His duty, as he saw it, was simple: keep her safe and get them both off this frozen rock. The days stretched into long, cold nights, but each morning, as Zara woke to the dim light of their tiny shelter, there was a subtle shift in her demeanor. The walls she had built around herself began to crumble. It wasn't much, but Jake noticed. She would smile faintly when he brought her food, or offer a quiet thank you after he helped her with her injured leg. It wasn't the wild, fiery personality she had once shown, but it was something. It was enough. But it wasn't until one particular morning, when the light from the distant sun filtered through the cracks in their shelter, that Zara's true feelings came to light. Jake was tending to the fire when he heard her speak. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "I didn't think humans were capable of such kindness," she murmured, her eyes fixed on the floor. Jake froze for a moment, unsure if he had heard her correctly. He turned slowly to face her, his heart racing with an unexpected hope. Zara looked up at him then, her emerald eyes meeting his with a mixture of vulnerability and something deeper. "I've been watching you, Jake. The way you've cared for me, even when I didn't deserve it." Her words trailed off, and for a moment, she seemed to struggle with herself. Jake took a step closer, his breath visible in the cold air. "You don't have to say anything, Zara," he said gently. "You're safe. That's all that matters." But Zara shook her head, her voice steadier now. "No, it matters. I didn't understand humans before. I thought you were all just like the others I've met. But you're different. I see that now." Her confession hung in the air between them, and for a moment, the world outside their shelter seemed to fade away. The storm raged on, but in that tiny space, warmth spread between them, not from the fire, but from the connection that had slowly but surely blossomed between them. Jake didn't know where this would lead, but in that moment, he knew something had shifted, something profound and real. It was more than survival now. It was the beginning of something new. And as Zara's gaze softened, her walls finally crumbled, revealing the person she had kept hidden for so long. "Thank you, Jake," she whispered. "Thank you for not giving up on me." He smiled, his heart swelling with a warmth he hadn't expected to feel in the middle of such a cold, desolate place. The days blended together, each one as cold and relentless as the last. Jake Mitchell and Zara remained. In their small, makeshift shelter, their bond growing stronger with each passing moment. The storm outside never seemed to stop, howling through the cracks in the walls, but inside, the two of them had found a kind of peace in the midst of chaos. Zara's injury was healing slowly, thanks to Jake's care, and though she still struggled with the weight of their circumstances, she had started to open up more. Jake had always believed in duty and survival, but with each quiet morning they shared, he found himself questioning what else he was fighting for. It was hard not to notice the way Zara had changed. She wasn't the same distant, prideful alien he had met in the beginning. There was a softness in her gaze now, a vulnerability that Jake had come to treasure. Despite the harshness of their surroundings, Zara's presence had become a source of warmth. One morning, as Jake stirred the fire, Zara approached him with a rare sense of urgency in her step. Her eyes were wide, filled with something more than just gratitude. She stopped in front of him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jake," she said, her tone tentative but firm. "I know I've been hard to deal with. I've pushed you away, but I need to ask something of you." Jake looked up from the fire, sensing the gravity of her words. "Anything, Zara," he replied, his voice steady, though his heart was beating faster than usual. Zara took a deep breath, her expression one of uncertainty. "You've been so kind to me, so patient, and I've realized that maybe I was wrong to think that I could survive this on my own. I thought I didn't need anyone. But now, I'm not so sure." She hesitated, glancing down at her hands before meeting his gaze again. "Jake, you've been my strength when I had none, and I've been holding something back. I'm scared." Jake stepped closer to her, his heart aching at the vulnerability she was showing. He reached out, gently touching her arm. "You don't have to be scared, Zara. You're not alone anymore." Zara's eyes searched his face, her lips trembling slightly as she spoke again, her voice almost breaking. "I never thought I'd say this, but I think I'm starting to care for you. More than I should." Jake's chest tightened at her confession, a mix of relief and something deeper stirring inside him. He had known for a while now that his feelings for Zara had evolved into something more than just duty, but hearing her admit it out loud filled him with warmth and hope. "Zara," he began softly, his voice steady yet full of emotion, "I care for you too. We've both been through so much, but I'm not going anywhere. I'll stay with you, no matter what." Zara's face softened, her eyes glistening with something between relief and tenderness. She took a step closer, her body language finally matching her words. In that moment, the storm outside felt like a distant memory. The cold, the isolation, they no longer seemed so insurmountable. With Jake by her side, Zara felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. The fire crackled between them, casting flickering shadows on the walls of their small shelter, but the warmth between them felt more real than anything the storm outside could throw at them. For the first time since they had crash-landed on this frozen world, Zara allowed herself to smile, and Jake couldn't help but return it. There was no telling what the future held, but for now, they had each other. And in this bleak, desolate place, that was all that mattered. The days that followed were marked by an unexpected tranquility. The storm outside still raged, but inside their shelter, the warmth between Jake and Zara grew, an unspoken bond that neither of them had anticipated. The fire crackled steadily in the corner, casting flickering shadows across the walls. Zara's injury had healed enough that she could move more easily now, and they spent the days in quiet companionship, adjusting to the rhythms of their isolated life. Jake found himself looking forward to the mornings, when the first light of dawn would break through the frost-covered windows, bringing with it the promise of another day spent together. Zara, who had once been distant and reserved, now offered small smiles as they worked side by side. She helped gather firewood, her movements still careful, but her spirit seemed lighter. There was a softness in her eyes that hadn't been there before, and Jake couldn't help but notice how her gaze lingered on him more often, her presence now something he cherished deeply. One morning, as Jake checked the dwindling supply of food, he noticed that Zara had been unusually quiet. He looked up to find her standing by the window, her back to him, staring out into the white expanse beyond. Her silhouette was framed by the pale light, a figure of quiet strength and vulnerability. Something in the way she stood, so still and lost in thought, made Jake's heart tighten. "Zara," he called softly, moving closer. She didn't turn, but her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking," she said, her words slow, as if weighing each one carefully. "About the future. About us." Jake stepped closer, his concern growing. "What are you thinking about?" Zara finally turned to face him, her emerald eyes meeting his with an intensity that took him by surprise. "I never expected to find someone like you here. Someone willing to help, to stay, even in the coldest of places. I thought I could never care for anyone again, but now her voice faltered, and for a moment, the wall she had built around herself seemed to return, though not as high or as impenetrable. Jake reached out, gently touching her arm, offering the warmth of his presence. "Zara, you don't have to say anything more. I'm right here with you, every step of the way." A flicker of relief crossed her face, and she nodded, her lips curling into a smile that was both sad and sincere. "Thank you, Jake. I didn't think I could ever let someone in, but now, I want to try. I want to see where we can go." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything they had both been through. The isolation, the cold, the silence, it had all led them to this moment, this shared understanding that was so much more than survival. Jake smiled back, his heart swelling with emotion. "We'll figure it out together," he said, his voice steady with the conviction of someone who had come to understand what truly mattered. There was no plan, no grand design, but in that moment, it felt enough. For the first time since they had crashed on this frozen world, Jake didn't feel the crushing weight of isolation. He felt hope, the kind of hope that Zara had brought into his life without even realizing it. As the days passed, their connection grew deeper. They still had their struggles, moments of uncertainty and doubt, but they faced them together. Zara's healing, both physical and emotional, was slow but steady. And Jake was there for every step, offering comfort, care, and a steady hand when she needed it most. The storm outside never truly ceased, but inside their little shelter, Jake and Zara found something even more powerful, a shared warmth that was more than just the fire burning in the corner. It was the warmth of two souls coming together in the coldest of places, finding solace in each other's company. And as the days turned into weeks, it became clear to both of them that this strange, unexpected journey had brought them something neither of them could have anticipated, a future together. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between Jake and Zara deepened. The harsh winds and freezing temperatures outside seemed like a distant memory, overshadowed by the growing warmth between them. They spent their days in the small shelter, finding small ways to make their life together a bit easier. Jake would check the radio equipment, hoping for any sign of a rescue, but the signal never came. Zara, though, was content in a way she hadn't been before. She was still recovering from her injuries, but each day brought her closer to the person she used to be, strong, determined, and independent. She had stopped pushing Jake away, and now, more than ever, she relied on him in ways she never imagined. For the first time, she felt safe, not just physically, but emotionally. Jake had become more than just her protector. He had become her friend, and slowly, as the days passed, she found herself thinking of him in ways she hadn't allowed herself to before. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Zara looked over at Jake, her gaze soft and contemplative. "Jake," she began, her voice a little uncertain, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said about the future." Jake turned to face her, his eyes filled with warmth and understanding. "Yeah," he asked, his voice steady. Zara took a deep breath, her fingers absently tracing the edge of the fire's glow. "I used to think I didn't need anyone, that I could handle everything on my own. But you—" She paused, her throat tightening a little as she found the right words. "You've changed that. I'm starting to believe that maybe I don't have to do everything alone." Jake's heart swelled with emotion as he listened. He knew what she meant. He had felt it too. He reached out, gently brushing his hand against hers. "You never have to be alone, Zara," he said quietly. "Not anymore." There was a quiet strength in his voice that comforted her. Zara smiled, the first truly genuine smile Jake had seen in a long time. It wasn't just the kind of smile you give when you're trying to mask your feelings. It was a smile of trust. A smile of someone who had learned to lean on someone else, even when it seemed impossible. The fire crackled softly between them, casting a warm glow on their faces. In that moment, there was no freezing cold, no endless snowstorm outside. There was only the quiet understanding that they had found something valuable in each other. The days continued to pass, and though the storm outside showed no sign of letting up, Zara's healing progressed. The two of them spent their days together, doing small tasks, talking about their pasts, and finding new ways to enjoy the company of the other. They laughed together more than they ever had before, and with each passing day, their connection only grew stronger. One morning, as the first light of dawn filtered through the frost-covered windows, Zara finally stood up without hesitation. She had been walking with a limp for weeks now, but today, her steps were more confident. She looked over at Jake, who was busy preparing a small meal for them. "Jake," she called out softly. He turned, his eyes lighting up as he saw her standing there. She smiled, her eyes filled with something that felt like hope. "I think I'm ready," she said. "Ready for what?" Jake asked, his voice soft with concern. Zara took a slow step forward, then another, her movement steady. She was no longer the fragile creature who had needed constant care. She was strong again. And in that moment, Jake realized something deep inside him had shifted too. "Ready for whatever comes next," she said with quiet confidence. Jake smiled, his heart swelling with pride. He hadn't realized how much he had come to depend on her strength. Together, they had survived the long freeze. Together, they had found warmth. And whatever came next, they knew they could face it together, side by side. The weeks went by, and the world outside their shelter remained a never-ending expanse of snow and ice. Jake and Zara had adapted to their new life, finding a strange rhythm in the isolation. The days had grown longer, and despite the cold that still gripped the planet, they no longer felt as if they were merely surviving. They were living. Zara had continued to recover, her steps becoming steadier each day. With every passing moment, Jake could see her strength return. The same strength that had once made her so proud and independent was now tempered with a new kind of gentleness, a gentleness that she had allowed herself to show only to him. They spent their mornings gathering supplies, checking the radio equipment for any sign of a rescue, though they both knew deep down that the chances of anyone finding them were slim. Still, the hope of escape lingered in the air between them, a shared belief that kept them going. The evenings were spent in quiet conversation. Sometimes they would talk about the past, about their lives before the crash. Zara had shared stories of her people, of her home planet, and of the missions she had once undertaken. Jake, in turn, told her about Earth, about the places he had seen and the people he had met. They both spoke of things they missed, things they had taken for granted before they were thrust into this world of snow and silence. One evening, as they sat by the fire, the warmth between them seemed to fill the room, more than just the heat from the flames. Zara was looking out the window, her eyes distant, lost in thought. Jake watched her for a moment before speaking. "What's on your mind?" he asked softly. Zara turned to him, her gaze intense. "I've been thinking about what comes next," she said. "About what happens when the storm finally clears, when we can leave this place." Jake paused, considering her words. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I don't know what the future holds, Zara. But I do know that whatever it is, we face it together." Zara looked at him for a long moment, and then, for the first time in a while, she smiled. A real, warm smile. It was a smile that spoke volumes, one that said she was no longer afraid of the future or of being alone. She had someone now, and for the first time, she felt ready to face whatever came next. The next day, after another long night of snow and wind, they decided to venture further out into the wilderness, to see if there was any chance of finding a way off the planet. They packed what little supplies they had left, knowing that their journey might not lead to rescue, but they needed to try. As they walked through the snow, Zara's hand brushed against Jake's, and for a moment, the cold didn't seem so biting. They were no longer just two strangers stranded on a distant world. They were a team, and that made all the difference. After hours of trekking through the snow, they came across a small ridge, where they could see a large rock formation in the distance. Zara's eyes brightened as she pointed toward it. "We might find shelter there," she said. Jake nodded. "Let's go check it out." They made their way toward the rock formation, the path growing steeper as they climbed. The cold was harsh, but they pushed through, their determination keeping them going. When they finally reached the rocks, they found a small cave, partially sheltered from the wind. Inside, it was warmer, though still far from comfortable. They set up camp, huddling close to each other for warmth. As they sat together, Zara looked at Jake, her expression soft. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for staying with me, for not giving up." Jake smiled, his heart swelling with emotion. "You don't have to thank me. I promised you I wouldn't leave. Zara's eyes searched his face, and for a moment, everything outside the cave seemed to fade away. In that small, intimate space, surrounded by the cold, they found something warmer than the fire between them, a sense of belonging, of partnership, and the unspoken understanding that, no matter what came next, they would face it together. The days grew longer, and though the cold still lingered, there was a subtle shift in the air. Jake and Zara had settled into a routine, one that felt natural in its simplicity. The shelter they had found within the rock formation was not much, but it was theirs, and it offered a sense of stability they had both come to appreciate. They spent the mornings gathering what little they could from the surrounding area, scouting for food and supplies. The days were filled with quiet moments of conversation, as they exchanged stories of their pasts, their worlds, and their hopes for the future. Zara had begun to speak more openly, sharing parts of her life she had once kept hidden. She told Jake of her home, a planet full of beauty and danger, of her family and the life she had left behind. Jake, in turn, spoke of Earth, the vibrant, bustling world that seemed so far away now. He spoke of his family, of the life he had once known, and of his journey to this strange, frozen planet. The connection between them deepened, and it wasn't just their shared struggle for survival that brought them closer. It was their growing bond, one that had blossomed out of respect, understanding, and the quiet comfort of knowing they had someone to rely on. One evening, as they sat together, the fire crackling softly between them, Zara looked at Jake, her gaze steady and calm. "Jake," she said, her voice softer than usual, "do you ever think about what happens when we leave this place?" Jake didn't have to think long. He had been asking himself the same question for days. The idea of leaving the planet, of finding their way back to civilization, seemed both thrilling and terrifying. He had grown so accustomed to this life with Zara that the thought of returning to a world that felt so far removed from the one they now shared was unsettling. "I think about it," he said slowly, his eyes meeting hers. "But I'm not sure what it means anymore. Being here, with you, has changed things. I don't know what comes next, but I know that I don't want to face it alone." Zara smiled, her eyes reflecting the warmth of the fire. "Neither do I," she whispered, the words carrying a depth of emotion that Jake hadn't expected. It was in that moment that Jake realized how much they had both changed. They had come to this place as strangers, forced together by circumstance, but now they were something more, partners, friends, and something deeper than that. The storm outside still raged, but inside their shelter, there was a peace they had both come to cherish. The days passed, each one marked by small victories, Zara's increasing strength, Jake's quiet but steadfast support, and the growing certainty that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. One afternoon, as they were exploring the area around their shelter, they came across a strange formation in the snow. It was a structure of sorts, half buried in the snow and ice, its origins unclear. Zara's curiosity piqued, and she led the way, her eyes bright with the promise of discovery. Jake followed close behind, his heart racing with anticipation. As they approached, Zara crouched down, brushing away the snow and ice to reveal what looked like an old, abandoned outpost. The walls were covered in strange markings, and though the building had clearly been abandoned for a long time, there was something strangely familiar about it. "This could be it," Zara said, her voice filled with excitement. "This might be the key to getting off this planet." Jake's heart leapt. He had been thinking of nothing but survival and the days stretching endlessly before them. But now, standing in front of this mysterious structure, he realized that they might finally have found the chance they had been waiting for. "Let's see what we can find," he said, his voice filled with a new sense of purpose. Together, they made their way inside, the door creaking open with surprising ease. What they found inside would change everything. An old communication system, still functional, and a chance to finally reach out to the world beyond their frozen exile. The future was no longer a distant dream. It was within their grasp. The air inside the abandoned outpost was stale, but there was a faint hum of life coming from the communication system that Zara had uncovered. Jake stood beside her, watching as she carefully worked to restore the damaged equipment. The small room was dimly lit, the walls covered with layers of frost and old, decaying technology. It was a far cry from the warmth they had found in each other, but the promise of escape was tangible now. Zara's fingers moved over the console with practiced ease, her brow furrowed in concentration. She spoke softly to herself in a language Jake couldn't understand, but the urgency in her voice made him step closer. "This is it," Zara muttered, her voice a mix of hope and disbelief. She pressed a few more buttons, and then, to their surprise, a low beep echoed through the room. The screen flickered to life, the faint glow of it casting long shadows across their faces. "It's working," Zara said, a grin spreading across her face. Jake's heart raced. "You did it," he said, his voice full of awe. Zara nodded, her eyes reflecting a spark of triumph. "We're not stuck here anymore." The feeling that had been building in Jake for so long, the fear of never escaping, of being trapped forever, began to fade. There was hope again, and it was growing stronger by the second. "Let's see who's out there," Zara said, focusing on the communication system. She began typing commands into the interface, her fingers flying over the keys. Jake stood behind her, watching as she worked. He couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Zara had always been so self-sufficient, and now, she was the one leading them out of this frozen exile. The room was silent except for the soft clicking of keys and the occasional hum from the system. Then, suddenly, the screen filled with static, and a voice crackled through the speakers. It was faint, but clear enough to make out the words. "This is the Helios station. Can anyone hear us?" Zara's eyes widened, and she quickly adjusted the frequency. "We hear you. This is Zara Valerian and Jake Mitchell. We are stranded on your planet, and we need help." The voice on the other end paused, then responded with a tone of disbelief. "Zara Valerian? Is that you?" "Yes," Zara replied, her voice steady. "It's me. We've been stranded here for weeks. Can you help us?" The voice on the other end grew clearer, more urgent. "Zara, we've been trying to reach you for days. Your coordinates have been logged, and we've sent a team to rescue you. Stay where you are. Help is on the way." Jake's heart leapt in his chest. It was happening. They were finally getting out. The voice continued. "We'll be there within a few hours. Just hold tight." Zara turned to Jake, her face a mixture of relief and disbelief. "We're really going home," she whispered. Jake couldn't help but smile. It had felt like a lifetime, but now, the impossible was becoming reality. They would leave this frozen planet behind, and they would do it together. He stepped closer to Zara, reaching out to touch her hand. "You did it," he said softly. She met his gaze, her eyes filled with a warmth that matched the fire they had built together. "No, Jake. We did it," she replied. "Together." It was a word that carried so much weight now. It was no longer just about survival. It was about what they had built between them, the trust, the bond, the quiet moments that had become everything. The outside world, with its dangers and challenges, felt distant. For the first time, Jake wasn't just looking to escape. He was looking forward to the future, one that he would share with Zara. As they sat together in the small outpost, waiting for their rescue, they both knew that this chapter of their lives was coming to an end. But what came next, they realized, was only the beginning. The stars outside the shelter had always been a reminder of what lay beyond, but now, they symbolized something more: hope, freedom, and a future built on the foundation they had created together. The hours that followed were filled with anticipation. Jake and Zara had retreated to their small shelter, their minds racing with the news of the rescue team. The cold still clung to the planet's surface, but the warmth in their hearts made the chill feel less unbearable. Outside, the winds howled, but inside their little haven, there was a sense of calm, a sense of security they hadn't felt in weeks. As they sat together, Zara couldn't stop glancing at the communication console, her fingers nervously tapping on her knees. "Do you think they'll really come?" she asked, her voice soft. Jake turned to her, offering a reassuring smile. "They said they would," he replied. "We just need to wait a little longer." Zara nodded, but her thoughts were far away. The future, once uncertain and filled with fear, now seemed full of possibility. She had never imagined that something as simple as leaving a desolate planet would feel like a victory. But with Jake by her side, it was more than just an escape. It was a new beginning. They had come so far since the crash. They had survived the storm, the isolation, the cold. But more than that, they had found something deeper, something that neither of them had expected. In the quiet moments they shared, they had become more than just two survivors. They had become partners, friends, and perhaps something more. It was hard for Zara to admit, but the feelings she had for Jake had grown beyond gratitude. She had come to care for him in ways that surprised her. And as the moments stretched on, the uncertainty about what lay ahead seemed less important than the fact that they would face it together. "Jake," Zara said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked at her, his heart skipping a beat. "Yeah. Thank you," she said, her eyes meeting his. "For everything. For staying. For not giving up." Jake felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He had never been one to seek praise, but hearing those words from Zara meant more than anything he could have imagined. He reached out, taking her hand in his, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly. "We've come this far. We'll make it through together." Zara's eyes softened, and for the first time in a long while, she felt the weight of the world lift from her shoulders. There was no more loneliness, no more fear of being abandoned. In Jake's presence, she felt truly seen, truly understood. As the day stretched into evening, they continued to wait, their thoughts intertwined, their hearts steady in the knowledge that they would soon leave this frozen world behind. The rescue team had promised to arrive soon, and Jake had no doubt that they would. But even as the minutes ticked by, he couldn't help but feel that it wasn't the rescue that mattered most. It was the journey they had shared, the trust they had built, and the future they now knew they would face together. Finally, the familiar hum of the communication console broke the silence. The screen flickered to life, and the voice of the rescue team crackled through the speakers once again. "This is Helios Station. We're approaching your coordinates. Prepare for extraction." Zara's breath caught in her throat, and Jake squeezed her hand, his own heart racing with anticipation. "It's happening," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Jake smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "Yeah, it is." And as the sound of the rescue team's arrival grew louder, they both knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter filled with possibilities, with challenges, and with the certainty that, no matter what, they would face it side by side. The sound of the rescue team's voice echoed in the small shelter, and Jake and Zara exchanged a look of quiet excitement. It had been a long time since either of them had felt true hope, and now, it was finally within their reach. As the minutes passed, the hum of the communication system grew louder, and a new sense of purpose filled the air. It wasn't just about leaving the planet anymore. It was about the life they would build when they finally left this frozen world behind. "We're almost there," Zara said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Jake nodded, his eyes locked on hers. "We've made it through. Together." Their hands found each other once again, and the simple act of holding her hand gave him a sense of peace he hadn't known he'd needed. They were about to be rescued, but in that moment, it wasn't the rescue that mattered most. It was the journey they had shared, the trust, the connection, and the love that had slowly, quietly, grown between them. Outside, the wind howled as it always had, but inside, there was only warmth. Zara let out a breath, her chest rising and falling as she looked around the shelter they had called home for so long. It wasn't much, just a small cave carved out of rock, but it had become a place of safety, of solace. It had become a home. "Do you ever think about what it will be like?" she asked, her voice quiet as she gazed out at the snow. "Life after this?" Jake looked at her thoughtfully. "I think about it all the time. But the truth is, I don't know. I don't know what comes next." He paused, his expression softening. "But I do know this. Whatever it is, I'll face it with you." Zara's heart fluttered at his words, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to truly believe in something beyond survival. She had spent so much of her life on her own, thinking she had to be independent, thinking she had to fight her battles alone. But now, she saw the truth. She didn't have to do it alone. And she didn't want to. "I don't want to face it without you," she whispered. Jake smiled at her, his heart full. "You won't have to." The sound of the rescue team's arrival grew louder, the hum of their engines vibrating through the walls of the shelter. Zara stood, her body stiff with anticipation, as she looked at Jake once more. They had come so far. They had survived, together. And now, as the door to their shelter creaked open, the cold winds from outside rushing in, they both stepped forward into the unknown. But for the first time since they had crash-landed on this distant, frozen world, Jake didn't feel afraid. He didn't feel alone. Together, they walked into the future, side by side, ready to face whatever awaited them beyond the storm. The wind howled, but it no longer sounded so terrifying. It was just the sound of a new beginning. And as the rescue team greeted them, offering their help and a way off the planet, Jake and Zara knew that the hard part was behind them. The rest, whatever it may be, would come. But they would face it together.